This is going to sound completely insane. I've been sitting on my phone for the past few hours trying to decide if I should even share this. The idea of it is so absurd I can barely wrap my head around it. But if anything, I need to have some record of this experience if things take a turn for the worst. And they're starting to look pretty bad. It all started about a month ago. For some context, I live with my roommate in a small flat in Washington, D.C. I'm not home a whole lot because my job requires me to work upwards of 70 hours a week. I came home one night after a harrowing day of work. It was pretty late, and I thought my roommate was already asleep. I was fully prepared to do my nightly routine and hop right into bed. I unlocked the door to my apartment, set my keys on the kitchen counter, and opened the fridge to scarf down some leftovers from the day prior. I turned my back from the kitchen counter for not even a minute as I rummaged through the fridge, scouring each shelf for my Tupperware container of taco meat. Upon finally finding it, I turned back around to head towards the microwave and heat it up. But something caught my eye. There were now 2 sets of keys on the kitchen counter. No, that's not right, I thought to myself. I knew I had just put my keys on the empty kitchen counter. So how could another set have magically appeared? Was I so tired I was seeing double? I rubbed my eyes, but the replica keys remained, still next to mine, clear as day. I tried to rationalize it immediately. I'm a logical guy. I can always find an explanation for even the most absurd phenomena. I knew I didn't have any spare keys, despite my mother's constant insistence that I made copies just in case. So how could another keychain, identical to the one I owned nonetheless, materialize next to mine in an instant? I figured my roommate had crept in behind me and placed his keys on the table next to mine. I was probably so exhausted I hadn't even heard him come in. Though this explanation made the most amount of sense, upon further inspection, I realized the keys were an exact replica of mine, right down to the Charmander keychain I had since I was a teenager. There were keys on this mysterious replica that I knew for a fact my roommate couldn't have had. For instance, I saw keys to offices in the building I worked at. The keys were even positioned the same way I had set them down. It looked as if someone had copied the exact placement of my keys and pasted it directly beside them on the counter. It was utterly impossible. But again, I insist that I was not an irrational man. Not then, at least. I knew this had to be some kind of prank. My roommate and I weren't close. He was a pretty peculiar guy with interests that differed from mine. We didn't interact much besides the occasional cordial greeting. But I never would have expected him to be smart enough to play a prank like this. It was odd, even for him. I continued to reason away, coming up with any plausible explanation for the duplication of my keys as I ate my dinner in silence and headed to bed. But I couldn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned and sweat through my sheets. I had known in my gut something wasn't right, but I had ignored it for the sake of my own sanity. The next morning, the cloned keys were gone. Only 1 pair remained on the kitchen counter. I breathed a sigh of relief, chalking it up to me being so sleep-deprived that I was imagining things. Boy, was I wrong. After about 2 weeks, I had honestly almost completely forgotten about the whole incident. That was, until it happened again. This time, I had just gotten out of the shower on my 1 day off. It was Saturday, and I had decided to go for a quick run around the city for some exercise. I had arrived back at my apartment and taken my AirPods out to jump in the shower. I placed them on my dresser without a second thought before gravitating towards the bathroom to do my thing. About 15 minutes later, I leisurely made my way out of the bathroom, heading towards my dresser to throw on a pair of shorts and a t-shirt when I saw it. 2 AirPod cases lay before me, one right where I had left it, and a duplicate right beside it. I had to bite back a scream. Where had the other case come from? How could I even discern the difference between the 2? Which one belonged to me? I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the scene before me in disbelief. I even contemplated whether or not I was going cross-eyed. I imagined the horror of beginning to see double of singular objects. I eventually, tentatively, reached a hand out to touch one of the cases to prove this theory, but I felt it in my hand. I felt them both in my hands. at the same time. That was when I decided something was seriously wrong. Now, what I did next, I can't provide an explanation for. I'm not sure what came over me. Perhaps it was sheer curiosity. Whatever it was a mistake. I had scrambled over to my bed, tearing away at the sheets and the comforter, to find my phone and ran back to the AirPod cases. I picked one of the cases up. At this point, I wasn't sure if I was picking up the duplicate or the original, but, in hindsight, I'm assuming it was the duplicate. I stared at my phone and saw they were connected to the AirPods. I pressed play on a song I was all too familiar with, Kelly Clarkson. The music I heard coming from these AirPods, if you could even call it music, was not Kelly Clarkson's "Since You Been Gone." No. This was what I can only describe as the most demonic sounds I had ever heard in my life. It was a chorus of screams, women, children, monstrous creatures wailing in agony, and at a volume so loud, I thought my eardrums had burst. It was similar to what I had imagined the depths of hell to sound like. I nearly smacked myself outside of the head trying to rip the AirPods out of my ears. I felt all the blood leave my body as my knees buckled beneath me. I couldn't move. I couldn't react. I couldn't even scream. I had no idea what I was dealing with, but I was beginning to believe it was otherworldly. My sanity had fled me in a mere instant, and I had no idea what to do next. That evening, I contemplated checking myself into a mental hospital. The doppelganger AirPods had disappeared, but I had started to notice the clones of my belongings appearing more frequently. That same day, I had found 2 of the same ferns growing by my beside window when I knew I had only bought one. I tried to pour myself a glass of bourbon to calm my nerves and found 2 of the same limited edition Blood Oath Kentucky Straight bourbon bottles right beside each other. I had gotten only one as a gift on my 25th birthday. I even went to brush my teeth that night and found a replica of my same, exact toothbrush, right down to the division of the bristles and the directions they were pointing in. I called out of work the next day and the following days after that. I couldn't function. I was living a life of dread, of trepidation. I was afraid to open my eyes. I was afraid to fall asleep. I felt as if I were going insane. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened tonight. I was holed up in the corner of my room, sitting at my desk, making a list of things that had duplicated themselves only to disappear in an instant. Throughout the course of the week, I had my laptop, my dresser, my picture frames, my pillows, and even my window duplicate themselves on more than one occasion. It had gotten to the point of being nearly inconvenient, if not inconceivably terrifying, specifically when my dresser had cloned itself right in front of the doorway to my bathroom. I hadn't had any contact with the outside world since the AirPod incident. Hadn't seen or spoken to a human being in fear of them seeing through my veiled mental deterioration. I hadn't eaten or slept. I knew I would die if I kept living like this. At one point, I heard the front door of my apartment swing open, followed by the muffled humming of my roommate as he made his way to his room. I knew he was my only chance at survival. He was the only other person I could cling to, that I could use as some token of normalcy, someone to keep me grounded. I ran to my bedroom door and flung it open. I raced to the kitchen and caught him just before he had laid a hand on his bedroom door. I was panting like a marathon runner, and probably sweating like one too, but I didn't care. I didn't care about my appearance anymore, about how crazy I looked, or about how crazy I was about to sound to him. I just needed someone to confide in. "Hey man, what's going on?" he said casually as he turned his attention to my hunched-over form. His tone immediately changed from cordial to genuinely concerned. "Whoa, you okay?" I gasped, struggling to get the words out. "I have to talk to you about something. Something that's been going on here." Whoa. All right, take it easy, man. Let's sit down for a second." He had put his hands in front of him gently and was talking to me as if he were trying to coax a rabid animal. I remember thinking his calm, cool tone was particularly out of character, given that, as I mentioned before, my roommate was a pretty odd guy and wasn't usually one to be great with social interactions. But at that moment in time, his level of emotional intelligence was of very little concern to me. "You have to listen to me," I tried to say, swallowing the saliva that had accumulated in my mouth. "There's something really wrong with this place. I keep seeing double." "Seeing double? Like you're too fucked up or something? Is that what you mean?" He stifled a laugh, clearly an attempt to lighten the mood, but I persisted. No, I'm not drunk. I keep seeing things appear. Objects that are duplicating themselves." I knew how it sounded. I knew there was very little chance he would believe me, but I didn't care. I needed to find a solution. I needed to talk to someone about this. Anyone. "Dude, that's impossible." My roommate chuckled nervously. "Are you sure you're not just having some eye problems or something?" No, you're not listening to me." I was growing more and more agitated by the second. "I can feel them too. The replicated objects. They're physically there. You have to understand." Suddenly, I saw something from behind my roommate, from behind his form. I saw movement. I know I did. I saw a figure. It was peeking at me from inside of his open bedroom door. Though it was dark, the only source of light coming from the kitchen, and it barely illuminated my roommate, let alone the area behind his large body. I saw it. I saw the glimmer of a black eye peeking at me from beyond him. It disappeared just as quickly as it appeared, as if it were snatched back into his room by an unseen force. I stared at my roommate with wild eyes. I pointed a shaky finger at him, ever so slowly. "Who are you?" I say, in a voice so low I almost didn't recognize it as my own. My roommate's face morphed from a concerned expression into one of sheer terror. What do you mean, man?" Silence rang in the air, and the tension was sharp enough to cut through steel. I stared at my roommate for God knows how long before I glanced once more at the doorway behind him, just as the figure reappeared. I could only see half of its face, a dark black eye, the corners of a mouth, and a long, slim nose. I couldn't see a discernible expression, but I knew in my gut that I could see just enough to recognize those features. The too long nose, the high cheekbones, the shaggy, greasy hair. I knew it was him, or one of him at least. It was my roommate. All I had to see after that was the movement of its mouth as it formed one word: run. And that's just about what did it for me. I bursted into action, bolting towards the door and nearly ripping it off of its hinges as I threw myself into the hallway of our dingy apartment building. I raced down the hallway, pushing through the emergency exit doors and sprinting through the streets of DC, narrowly avoiding getting hit by a slew of cars on my way out. Yet, the entire time I could still hear them, the footsteps behind me. I didn't bother turning around. I ran for what felt like miles before finally slowing to a halt, only when the sound of the footsteps behind me subsided. I ended up near a dimly lit dive bar on the wrong side of town and decided to head in for a drink because, Jesus, after that night, wouldn't you? And that takes me to where I am now, sipping on a vodka soda, sitting here typing this all out, recounting the past few weeks that have been nothing but complete chaos. I was lucky enough to have had my phone in my back pocket when the whole situation with my roommate went down. I'm surprised it didn't fly out as I ran for my life down the streets of DC. I don't know what to do. I can't call the police. I'll sound like a complete lunatic. Regardless, I know what I saw. I know there's something seriously wrong. The only upside of this night is that during the time I took to write this out, someone must have noticed how troubled I looked and ordered me another vodka soda, because now there are two sitting in front of me.